Hi, my name is Chuck, and today we'll be making a book pumpkin. This craft makes a beautiful fall-themed decoration perfect for your home or office, or even as a gift. To start off, you'll need a book. Thicker is better, but making it too thick will make the craft take longer. I recommend 1.5 to 2 inches thick. I'm using a hardcover book, but paperback works just fine too. For our supplies, you'll need a cutting tool, such as a box cutter, scissors, or a razor, a pencil and a marker, glue. Hot glue works best, but craft glue will work just fine as long as you don't mind holding things in place longer. For those of you using hot glue, take special care not to burn yourself. You'll need paint in whatever color you want your final product to be. We're using acrylic craft paint, but I've seen spray paint also used. You could even use markers or ink for this. If you're not using spray paint, you'll also need a paintbrush. And finally, you'll need something to decorate the top as well as a stem. We have green crinkled paper and some fake leaves for decorations. For a stem, I'm using a stick from my yard, but the craft bags made available with this craft have a cork in them instead. Let's get started. First things first, you need to make a stencil for the shape of your pumpkin. This will lay the groundwork of where to cut your pages. On a piece of paper, or the first page of your book, draw out the shape of half of a pumpkin. Pumpkins, of course, come in many different shapes and sizes. You can make it taller or more stout, rounded or steep. It doesn't have to be perfect, but make sure you shape it now how you want it to be, because it's very hard to change later. I will recommend that all pumpkins made have a nice flat bottom to help them stay standing up. Once I got the shape I wanted in pencil, I went back over it with a Sharpie just for ease of visual. Once you have your stencil drawn, cut it out and set it aside for a moment, because we need to prepare our book. And that means the cover has to go. Very carefully make an incision where the binding meets the first page. Repeat that cut where the binding meets the last page. This should leave you with a bundle of pages with adhesive on the spine. If your book has a bit of cloth on the binding, take a moment now to remove it, as well as any stubborn cardboard. I also cleaned up my binding by shaving off the excess paper, but this step is unnecessary. It really isn't all that visible in the finished product. Next, find your stencil, hopefully it hasn't wandered too far, and trace its outline onto the first page of the book. If your book has any pages at the beginning that are thicker and stiffer than the others, remove those now, and any at the back. They might interfere with the final product if left in. I discovered that the first pages where I drew my stencil were like this, and removed them after I drew the stencil. But, as a pleasant side effect, this gave me a sturdier stencil when I cut it out. It also let me unfold the pages to preview the overall shape of my pumpkin, which I was quite pleased with. Now comes the shaping of your pumpkin. Once you have your stencil outlined on your first page, you can begin to cut. With a razor or box cutter, you can simply run the blade around the perimeter of your stencil drawing and remove whatever was cut cleanly through. Don't try to pull apart any pages that were not cut cleanly through, as this could rip the final product. If you're cutting with scissors, I find that it's best to lift up a few uncut pages at a time and cut them into the stencil shape, pausing to remove the scraps and possibly even to reapply the stencil as you get further down. As you make scissor cuts, You may need to flip what you've already cut back so you can clearly see what you still have to cut. However you perform your cuts, you'll keep going until your entire book is in the shape of your stencil. As you make your cuts, make sure you stay true to the original shape of the stencil. Don't allow your cut to grow in size with each page removed. Otherwise, your pumpkin might end up slightly lopsided. When your cutting is finished, I recommend you clean the edges of any hanging scraps. These can interfere with the next step. Do your best to clean the edges, and when you're done, it will be ready for painting. Painting just the edges of your book pumpkin will give the finished product the illusion of a completed color. This is easiest to accomplish by holding the book together and painting the edges of the pages as if they were a single surface. I used some C-clamps that I had lying around to hold the book together and to hold it upright while I worked, but these aren't strictly necessary. Using a solution of about 40% water and 60% acrylic paint, I applied a layer to the edge with my brush. Once it was entirely coated, I gave it some time to dry, and I considered if it needed a second coat. I did end up putting a second coat on my pumpkin, but if you're happy with the color the first time, you can leave it alone. Once your painting is finished, and it has had time to dry, you may find that your pages are stuck together. This is normal, and our next step is to fix that. Carefully go page by page and slide a finger between them. You may need to flex your book back and forth a bit to loosen the paint enough to make this possible. This process is tedious, but I found it necessary for the finished product. Just keep gently sliding those pages apart. Once all the pages are loose, the next step is to form them into the round pumpkin shape. In order to do that, the spine of the book needs to be very loose and pliable. To accomplish this, I took a few pages and folded them back on themselves until it creased the spine. I repeated this process again and again throughout all the book. To be sure that your spine is flexible, I recommend doing this twice or more. When your book's spine bends freely, it's time to shape it. I recommend practicing this process without glue before making it permanent. The idea is to place glue all along two edges of the spine, and then making them meet up by bending the book open and holding those glued edges together. I recommend being very liberal with your glue for this. If you're using craft glue, you'll need to hold it in place longer after pushing the two sides together. It may help those of you using craft glue to use a scrap of paper glued like a bridge along the gap to hold it together. Once it's holding its shape, you may begin to see the pumpkin beginning to emerge. You may also notice that some pages are making large gaps in the shape. This is the next problem to address. To fix these gaps, find the worst offenders and apply glue as close to the spine within the gap as possible. Then press the surrounding pages together. Do about 2 of them, and then reassess the shape. Having loose sections pulled together also helps to pull the clumped sections apart. The more of these gaps that you pull together with this process, the better the shape should start to look. When you're happy with the shape of your pumpkin, the last step is to decorate the top. I started with the crinkle grass to give it a splash of color, but this was a mistake. The only way to make sure the stem is attached as securely as possible is to start with it. To attach decorations to your pumpkin, apply a dot of glue and carefully press the decoration into place. Make sure your pages are placed how you want them before you attach the decorations, as the glue used in this process will also hold the pages in whatever position they are in when you glue it. When you're happy with your decorations, congratulations! Your book pumpkin is finished. Thanks for watching.